Welcome back. So before we kick things off in the material world inside of Houdini, I'd like to mention a few things. One, have a workspace similar to this where you have multiple panes open because it becomes a hassle to move around since we have to jump from like the out context to the object level context, and we'd like to stay in the material network. Something to consider: these two sides are linked to each other and these two sides are linked to each other. Okay, so here's our car paint, which has been rendered at low resolution, low samplings, nothing too fancy. Turned off ray variance, anti-aliasing, just for faster render. Some of the settings that I did do with the mantra node, just so that I could get correct shadows, is I put the environment in forced phantom just for the time being, and only the cars being rendered. Okay, moving things along. Usually the way you would work with materials inside of Houdini is you could do your test renders in your render view, so they would appear here, or you could use this tool here, and this will allow you to quickly render within your viewport. Also, what I have done is I have isolated just the area that will have the actual car paint shader. So, and I can do this because every part of the model where materials will be assigned have this variable that we can look up. Okay, so moving on, let's stop this for a second. So this car paint shader is pretty basic. You could extrapolate on this idea and make it as complex as you'd like. But what I have done is I have a principal shader that governs the base color, which is green. Added some roughness to, or reduced the roughness from our default values. Added some anastrophe and give it a direction. Add some metallic, full reflectivity, full coat, and some roughness to the coat. Everything else can stay the same. In the pattern, it's a green, but it's a slightly different green with different values within our metallic coat and roughness parameters. And here, taking a UV noise with default parameters, you can play around with these if you like. Pushing a cell noise, okay, pushing a cell noise with if this UV noise was not there, you'd get a pattern like that. But because of this UV noise, we have some uneven distribution of within this pattern. So we do that, and then add a fit range to even out the differences. It's ideal to not use just black and white. Have different shades of gray within your pattern. That's really helpful, and it'll give you some better results, not very stark contrast results, unless that's the objective, and that will be the objective when we start making the carbon fiber shader. Then we push all of that into our layer mix. So both principal shaders, go in A and B, and our pattern goes into the alpha. And by the end of it, we get something like this. So there's problems in this render, mostly due to lack of render samples. And the color that you see here is reflections from the environment, as you see here. Okay. So moving on to finalizing this shader and turn it into a node itself with parameters. What we'll do is, to do that inside of this new setup, we'll create a surface export. This will only export surface information. When we talk about displacement, we'll touch on what we have to do next. Create an output. Color, opacity, and everything. Lighting model goes into their desired location. Create a collect. And now with all of this, well, you don't have to create these manually, but I do. So we can take all of this, collapse this into a material, not a subnet. And here's our material. So some of the connections break, but that's okay. And you can name this anything, like green or just carp paint, really. Give it a color if you like. So if we add this to the car material, what we'll see is, as this render viewport render bucket re-renders, everything comes through. So the advantage to making this selected into material, this node here, this material builder, is we're able to cache this data out. If you look at this icon here, this material is cached out. What that means is the VEX code that's being generated is cached, and it doesn't have to recache this information or recreate this information every time, which will slow down renders if you're re-rendering time and time again. Okay, so that's the advantage to creating material subnets like these. Also, what we can do at this point is something that I want to talk about. When we assign this car paint, we don't really see anything happening here. So what's going on here is just created an external parameter for the color, just so we're able to control our colors from outside the node. We don't have to enter the node, and you can create parameters for everything if you like the roughness, the reflectivity, and control them from here. Okay. So if we do a quick test render, see if we've not messed anything up and our shader still works. And as you can see, when we did some changes within the shader, so it needed to recache itself. So it recooked and cached itself. So this icon's full again. It's a good sign. So here's our basic car paint shader. Really basic, to be honest. But that's the thought. And you can take this as far as you'd like to. Next, I'd like to go into creating the shader for our walls. That would involve some texture work. So see you there. Thank you.